Hey class, in this video I'm going to go over the basics of creating a very simple HTML website, and we will also publish the website on GitHub. So we're going to need a text editor to get started. I'm going to use Sublime Text. That's just my kind of personal preference. There's a lot of different text editors. One of the reasons I like Sublime is it's very simple. There's not a lot of bells and whistles. But there's plenty of stuff out there. VS Code is very popular these days. It doesn't really matter what text editor you use, but if you want to follow along, it'll be easier to use Sublime because look more or less the same. So there's a link here to download Sublime Text. It's free to use. You can buy a license if you want, but it'll let you use it for free forever. So you don't need to buy a license. And you should be able to use it on Windows or Mac. If you have any issues with downloading and installing it, just let me know and we can go over it. And so we're going to use Sublime. That's all we're going to use today. So Sublime, writing a website and writing code is a little bit different than some of the other media stuff we've done. We're not using a GUI editor with drag and drops and buttons and stuff like that. We're actually just like writing the raw data into a text file. So it's a lot of typing. It may be a little unfamiliar at first, but once you get, used to the syntax, it's pretty easy to do. And so let's just get started. So once you've downloaded Sublime, you can open it up. I already have it on my dock here, so I'm just going to click on it. But when you open it up, it's going to look like this. There's nothing there. There's just a line number 1 and a cursor, and you can just start typing stuff. So it's a little bit like Microsoft Word or Google Doc, but there's no built-in stuff. It doesn't do spell check. It doesn't format stuff. It's just for writing pure raw text and creating files. So the first thing we want to do before we really write any text is save our file and create a project folder for it as well. So when I start Sublime, if I start typing, it's just going to create like a little tab like this. But if I hit Control S, it'll let me save my file, or if I go to File and Save. And so I'm going to go to my MMP 100 folder, and I'll just use this to get started and create a project folder for this project. So I'm going to right click here and go to New and Folder, and I'll call this Web. And then in here, I'm just going to build my website. And this is very important. Don't skip this. You have to name this file index.html. Every website has an index.html file. It's not capitalized, and it has to be spelled exactly the way you see it. When it comes to editing text and making documents for the web, you have to be very, very precise. There's no room for misspelling stuff or adding spaces or doing other things like that. So I'll let you know when that's especially important, but we need to make sure there's an index.html file. If there isn't one, when we publish the website, it's not going to work correctly. So I'm going to save that, and you'll see index.html right there. And this is just a convention. Every website has an index.html. It's just what the browser is going to look for when you go to the website. It's going to load index.html, and that'll link out to the other parts of the website. So now we can actually start writing some HTML. HTML looks a little goofy. It's very different probably from any text you've written before. If you're writing a paper or a poem or a text message to your friend or something like that, we use HTML markup language. So markup language is sort of a way of describing the content so that the website knows where to display the content. And we also include information that's important for the website that you don't actually see on the page. And the way that this looks, a lot of, you're going to be using, let's do a little drawing for a second. So you're going to be using a lot of brackets like that look like this. These are called angle brackets. And you can find them on your keyboard. They're sort of like, if you look on the keyboard, they're the same keys that we used a lot when we were doing animation with Adobe Animate. It's those two left and right facing little triangle angle brackets on the comma and the period. So we call those angle brackets. They also kind of look like a less than and a greater than sign, but we just call them angle brackets. And in our angle brackets is stuff that's telling the website how to work. And then outside of our angle brackets is content. So inside the angle brackets, there's HTML stuff. And then usually, not all the time, but usually we use a little closing bracket. So it's a bracket with a little slash after it. The slash is right next to the brackets. It's the little question mark. Although it's a forward slash. And then, we close our HTML stuff. And then the content kind of goes in between this section and this section. And then, so the brackets basically say start doing this thing, and then here's our content, and then stop doing this thing. And HTML is also a structured document. It's called a tree format. You can think of it as branches. And so what that basically means is we start with one node, our HTML node, and then everything else is inside of that. So in our HTML, we're going to have a head section, and we're going to have a body section. And so both of these have to be contained within the greater HTML structure. And then it just keeps going like that. So we start with HTML, then we go to body, and then inside the body we have content. So we have an H1, which is like a header. We'll do one of those in a second. We have a paragraph. You might have an image, and then you have your head section. So it looks like a big sort of structured tree. And that's a very common format for a lot of digital data. Okay, so let's get started. Let's actually write some HTML. So when I want to write some HTML, I'm going to hold Shift, and I'm going to hit the left-facing angle bracket. And one of the first things that you'll notice, if you don't want to type too quickly when you get started, because Sublime Text is going to try to kind of help you do some stuff. I'm going to increase the size of the text a little bit. So I think that'll make it easier to see on the screen. So when I write that angle bracket, you'll notice that Sublime is already like recommending a lot of text for me. This is sort of like the early version of AI. Now, obviously, AI will just do whatever you want it to. But this is kind of like trying to give you some suggestions. So the first thing that we need to write in an HTML document is the doc type. And so if I type in a D, actually it's not in our suggestion. So this looks like this, doc type HTML. This is the first line of pretty much every HTML document. And basically what it's saying is this is an HTML document. The document type is HTML. And this is kind of its own line. It's actually not related to the rest of our data. Oh, and I forgot it has a little exclamation point before it. So then we just hit enter, we go to the next line. So one of the nice things about HTML is we can actually see how other people write HTML. If I go back to the web, one of the things that's cool about the way the World Wide Web was designed is they used open source protocols. What that means is every website you can see the HTML and the code behind it. So if I go to our website and I go to this drop down here and I go to tools, and go to, where is it? I actually don't see it on here. But, okay, maybe if I right click. Okay, there you go. If you right click, there's a key command for this that what I usually use, which is Control U. So I forgot where that was. But anyway, if you right click, go to view page source, you're going to see the actual HTML that makes up the website. So you can see that doc type HTML. That's the one that we just wrote. And the next one we're going to write is this one. So that makes HTML very easy to learn because you can look at what other people are doing. And if you like something that they're doing, you can just steal it. There's no reason not to do that. There's some cases where you don't want to do that. But most of the time, if you see something and you think that's cool, I want to do that, you can take it and just use it on your own website. Obviously, you can't take their content, but you can take the way that the HTML is created. So every website works like that. Any website that you go to, if I go to newyorktimes.com and I hit Control U on Windows, I think it's Command Option U on Mac. Anyway, you can see the same thing. There it is, doc type HTML, and then HTML language equals English. Here's our head section, and here's all this content. And so, some websites have a lot more stuff going on in them, like the New York Times. Some are more simple, but all of them allow you to view the source. So that's a nice thing about HTML. So as we saw, then we have the HTML lang. So lang is short for language. You can just put en for English. If your website is in Spanish, you can put es. Or if it's in another language, you can put another language, but we'll just stick with English. And so usually you start with those. HTML is also very forgiving. If we forget to put in these tags, it's just going to make them for us. But we want to try to learn the basics, so we're gonna make them. So now we just say we want to start our HTML document. So again, Sublime is going to try to help us do some stuff. So you'll notice that if I type in HTML, it just generates this whole HTML section. So that's useful, but we're going to undo that and just go over each bit by bit. So I'm going to close this tag. So this is referred to as an opening tag. So it starts our HTML. So then each tag has a closing tag. So again, Sublime is going to help me a little bit here. Another thing that's going to be a little bit tricky getting used to is that Sublime is going to kind of guess when you want to add certain things, and it's just going to add them for you. So it makes it easy early on to make typos. So if I do this and then I type HTML, I've got a typo because I've written HTML twice. So just be careful for that. If you notice weird typos like that, it's because Sublime is trying to help you out, and until you get used to it, it can be kind of confusing. All right, so I do want to close my HTML. And so if I hit the angle bracket and then the /, Sublime kind of guesses, well, I created this HTML and I need to close the HTML, so it's going to close it for me. So you'll notice some tags close, others don't. Most tags that have content inside of them close, whether that's text content that we see on the page or if it's HTML content that is rendered by the browser. Okay, so I'm going to save this. And so in every HTML document, there's a head and a body section. The head section is full of meta information about the website that we don't actually see on the page. So you can think of it like your brain in your head. You don't see your brain, but it contains a lot of information. The body is like your body that you actually see. The body is the stuff that we see on the page. So we're going to start with our head section. So if I type in HE, it's going to guess I want head, and it's going to add this whole thing for me. So that's nice. Thank you, Sublime. If I do the same thing with body, it's going to add the body for me. Another thing you might be noticing is that there are different colors applied to different pieces of text. These colors don't have anything to do with the functionality of the website. They are just there to visually help us to be able to read the document. So different text editors have different color schemes. Sublime even has multiple color schemes. If you go to Preferences and go to Select Color Scheme, you can choose different color schemes and find something that you like. I'm just using the default, so it's probably what you'll see when you open it. But there's different color schemes, and you can install new color schemes and do all sorts of stuff. So it can be helpful. The color coding can be helpful. Like if I make a mistake like this, you can see that this isn't the right color. So sometimes it'll help you notice typos, but it's not actually a functionality. It's just there to help you read the text. Okay, so our HTML has a head section and a body section. Let's put something in the head section to start. So every HTML page should have a title. A title sounds like it might be something that you would see on the page, but it's actually not. The title is what you see in the tab at the top of the browser, and it's also what shows up as the name of the website if you Google it or something like that. So for example, here you can see this web MMP 100. That's the title of my website here. So if I view the source, you can see that title right there. That's just what shows up in the tab. And it's also what shows up in Google. I don't know if this will show up in Google, but if I search BMCC Open Lab MMP 100 Spring 2025, so you can see this is for the Open Lab page. This is for the syllabus page. So the title is what shows up in Google results or other search engines and stuff like that. But it doesn't actually show up on the page itself. There's no web-mmp100 on this page. So the title for our project is going to be Choose Your Own Adventure. And then Sublime is, so I made a mistake there. Sublime thought I wanted to do another title. I thought it was going to close it for me, but if I hit the slash, it'll close it for me. Okay. There's a lot of other stuff that we may put in the head section, but for now, I'm just going to put one other thing, which is very typical. This is a meta char set, and we're going to use UTF-8. This is just a very common thing that tells the browser which characters to use, and UTF-8 is just a very basic character set. So characters are like the text that we see on the screen, like what letters, what alphabets to load. That just tells the website to load sort of a basic character set. But this is also a good chance to talk about this thing right here. We already did this once up here, but let's talk about it down here. So this is called an attribute. An attribute is something that goes inside of our first HTML tag. So it's never in a closing tag. It's only ever in like the first main tag. And what it is it just gives us a little bit more information that's specific to that tag rather than generally the document. And so for this meta tag, meta is information about the page. This character set is set equal to the string or quotation marks UTF-8. So that's what attributes always look like this. They always start with just a name for the attribute, like lang for language and char set for character set. And then there's an equal sign, and then there's a value. And the value always has quotation marks around it. Okay, so this is, so far we can't actually see anything, but now we're gonna add some content into the body. In our body section, we have different types of tags, and most of them have correspond to something you might see in like a newspaper. So for example, a newspaper has headlines, it has bylines, it has paragraphs. And so the web, the early version of the web, used those same conventions for their components. So we're just gonna add a couple basic ones. So a header is an H tag, but you can see there's H1, H2, H3, H4. There's different levels of headers. So just like in a newspaper where you have like the main headline, you have subheadlines, we can use different levels of headers. I'm just gonna use an H1 here for the main title of the web page. I'm gonna call this Choose Your Own Adventure. So this is the same thing as the title. So they don't have to be the same, but I do want those to match. So we have a header, and then our main sort of like unit of text that we use is a paragraph. And so since this is very common, we just use a P tag for this. So if I hit P and hit enter, Sublime is going to fill that in. And so here I'm going to say, welcome to my website. And I'll put a little smiley face. Okay, so that's our first really simple setup for a website. Let's actually open this up in the browser and see what it looks like. So this Sublime editor is sort of like Photoshop or Audacity or Adobe Animate. It's where we edit the website, but it's not obviously what it looks like when we open the website in the browser. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm gonna open up my file system. I'm gonna go to my MMP100 folder. I'm gonna go to this web folder that I just created, and then I'm just gonna double click this index.html. You can see it has a little Chrome link there. It may open in a different browser. It doesn't really matter that much, but it's probably best if you use Chrome. If you don't see it with the Chrome icon, you can right click and go open with, and you'll probably see all of your browsers here. So it doesn't really matter that much, but for sticking along with the demo, I recommend using Chrome. So I'm gonna open up Google Chrome, and there we go, we see our website. So you can see the title here in the tab. You can see the H1 here that we added, and then you can see the paragraph as well. So this is a very, very simple website. You can see in the browser bar, the URL is just this file C. So this is not on the internet. If I sent this link to somebody when they tried to open it on their own computer, what they would see is just like nothing. It would just say like this file doesn't exist. So we can see local files that are on our own computer, but you know, we can't send this to other people. That's what publishing is for, and we're gonna get to that in a little bit. All right, so let's take a look at our source code, and we can see that it's the same source that we wrote in Sublime. So that looks pretty good. So that's a pretty basic website, but now what we're going to do is make it a little more interesting by adding some links. So it is a choose your own adventure story. We're going to give the viewer or the reader the option to choose different branches of the story and then see where they go. And this is also going to be a chance for us to write a hyperlink and talk about how hyperlinks work. So we're just going to add a few links, and then we're going to add some pages for those links to go to. And that's kind of the main thing that makes the web interesting and that we want to cover in this demo. And there's a few things to watch out for, so I'll try to make sure that we see those. Okay, so I'm going to add some links. To add other pages, we're going to have to create more documents. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up my project folder. This is normally what I do when I'm working in Sublime. I normally don't just have one document open. So I'm going to close this, and I'm going to go to File. I'm going to go to Open Folder. So it's much more common when you're writing code or making a website to have a project folder open. And so I'm going to go here and choose my web folder and then click Select Folder. And so what Sublime does is it basically shows you like a little version of what you have on your file system. And so when I make other files, I'll see where the files are, and I'll be able to connect them. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a folder to save all the files for my story. This may not make a ton of sense just because we're not going to create that many files, but it's a good way to practice how websites are usually structured. So I'm going to go back to my my main folder here. And actually, I could do this in Sublime as well. I could right-click and create a new folder. So let's just stay in Sublime. So I'll right-click on this web folder and create a new folder. And I'm going to call this story. So all the pages for my story will go into this folder. But I'm going to create the links first, and then we'll create the pages. So let's add another paragraph, and we'll introduce what we're doing in this page. So this is a choose your own adventure story where you decide the outcome. And then just as my example, I'm going to ask the reader if they want to be an animator or a coder. This is just an example. Your story can be whatever you want it to be. I'm just using this as kind of like a basic example. So I'm going to add another paragraph, and I'm going to say choose. I'm just going to say, do you want to be an animator? Or do you want to be a coder? So I'm kind of presenting the user with a choice. This is one of the things that's cool about interactive stories and choose your own adventure books and video games and things like that, where we can give the users choices in the story. You can't really do that in like a film or a novel or something like that. So that's what's kind of exciting about using an interactive media like the web. So let's see if those paragraphs appear. So normally when you're writing a website, you have to refresh the page to see changes there. So if you make some changes and you go back to the browser and they're not there, just make sure to hit the refresh button and they'll appear. Okay, so now I have to make these pieces of text links, and I have to link them to another HTML page. So to make a link, we use something called an anchor tag. And what we do is we wrap the anchor tag around the text that we want to be the link. So this is going to look a little bit weird, but I'm going to put some HTML inside of the HTML that I already have. So to do that, I'm going to make a new bracket, hit A, and then I'll close the A tag. And then I'm just going to go to the other side of the tag, and I'm just going to close that A tag. So Sublime closed it for me, like I would expect it to. And so now this is going to be a link. The problem is it's not going to look like a link quite yet. We go over here. What we need to do is add a hypertext reference. So inside of this first A tag, just like we have these attributes, we're going to add an attribute right here. So I'm going to hit a space. I'm going to do this attribute is called href. Notice again, Sublime is kind of helping me out. It's showing me what some of the options are, and it's gonna, if I hit enter on href, it's gonna add the equals and the quotation marks for me. So you don't have to do that. You could type these out. You could just hit the equal sign and then the 2 quotation marks, and then you can type the link in there. So to create a link, we can go into a folder and then reference a page. So we're going to go into the story folder. And then to signify that we're using a folder, we just put a /. So the / in the URL means folder. You've probably seen a lot of / in URLs in the past. So every, lots of URLs, like the URL for our OpenLab has these slashes in it. Each one of those slashes basically means this is another folder. So inside the story, we're going to create a page called animator.html. This page doesn't exist yet, but it's going to be one of our HTML pages where we add some more content. So if I save this and I go back to the browser and I reload, now notice that animator is now a link. If I click on the link, there's no file, so I get this little error, but that's okay. We're going to add it. Okay, so we can be an animator. And then we might want to be a coder. So let's put another a tag here. And I'll do href equals story/coder.html. So I'm just writing it out right now. I'm not using Sublime's suggestions, but now we have another link. So now we just need to set these up with some real pages to link to. And then we'll also link it back to the main page. And that'll kind of be where we'll pause for this intro part. All right, so let's make those pages. So I'm just gonna hit Control N to make a new page. And then I could write all of this HTML from scratch, but since a lot of it is gonna be the same, what I'm gonna do is just copy it. So I'm gonna select all of this stuff and copy it, and then paste it in this new document. And then I'll just kind of delete most of this stuff and just leave the header. So now I've got this simple HTML document, but it has the same title and the same header, so it'll look like it's part of the same website, but I'm gonna add different content here. So I'm gonna save this, so I'm gonna hit Control S, and I'm gonna put this in the story folder, and I'm gonna call this animator.html. And then I'm also just gonna save another copy of this right away because I'll be able to make my coder.html. So I'm gonna hit File, Save As this time. And I'm gonna save it as coder.html. So now I have 2 files inside my story folder. I have animator.html and coder.html. You can see with Sublime, I can have all of these open at the same time in these little tabs, just like our browser. And so now I can add separate content here, depending on what the user chose for their story. So I'll go back and reload, and now we've got animator page. There's nothing on here yet, but we'll add some stuff, and the coder page. So for now, just to keep the demo short, I'm just gonna add like a quick sentence like, oh, you chose to be a coder, congratulations, and then go back to the main. So we'll learn how to link back to the home page, which is important. On my coder page, I'll add a paragraph, and I'll say, congratulations, you chose to be a coder. You will make tons of money creating a new app. Just some whatever. And then I'm gonna link back to the main page. So I'm gonna add another paragraph. And when I'm linking from one folder backwards, so this is something that a lot of people get tripped up on, especially if you're not used to writing text. So let's look at our folder structure for a moment. So our main folder has index.html. We're linking into story. And you can see we have these 2 links here, but we can't see where we came from. So if we want to go back, we don't know the name of the folder when we're in here. When we're inside web, we know that this folder we want to go to is story. But when we're inside story, all we can see is these documents. We don't know where we came from. So to get back, we just use ... Dot dot is sort of a shorthand on a computer to mean go back. So I'm going to do an anchor tag, which is just the A, short for anchor. And I'm going to say href is dot dot and then slash. So it's still a folder, so we still use a slash, and then index.html. And I'm going to just say start over. And then I'll close that anchor tag. So for whatever reason, this is one of the things that a lot of people really have a hard time with when they first start making a website. Hopefully this makes sense. If it doesn't, let me know and we can go over it. But now I should be able to go to my coder page, and it says, congratulations, you chose to be a coder. And then we can say start over. Okay, so that's pretty good. Let's add to our animator page. And I'll say, wow, animators are so cool. Okay, so we just want some basic content, and then we're going to link back to the start over page. So we'll say href dot dot slash. So dot dot is go back to the web directory, and then index.html. And we'll say start over. And I'll close the anchor tag and close the paragraph tag. Okay. So again, this is one part that a lot of people find tricky. If you have any questions, I'm happy to go over this again or work with you on your website in office hours. I'm going to add one more link just to try to make it a little bit more clear how this works. So maybe I get to the animator page and I say, you know what, actually I should have been a coder. Let's add a link to the coder page. So the animator page and the coder page are in the same folder, so they can see each other. If I want to link there, I just go directly there. So I say, gee, maybe you wish you had chosen to be a coder instead. And then I'll add a anchor tag around coder. And so notice this time I am not using any slash at all. I'm not using slash for the story folder. I'm not using a slash to go back to the main directory. These two pages are in the same folder, so they can see each other. And so I can just link directly there. So now if I go to animator, and go to coder, and go to start over. Okay. So those are some of the basics. That'll be enough to get you started. There's a ton of other stuff that you can do with HTML. But you know, as mentioned many times in this class, we're just doing sort of brief, quick dives into a bunch of different topics. And so we don't have a ton of time to go over all of the different things that you can do with it, but those are the basics that'll get you started, and you'll be able to start creating a choose your own adventure story. I'm going to stop here, and I'm going to make another video for publishing on GitHub just so we can see that process. And so I'll see you guys over there in a minute. And yeah, this is just the basics. You should elaborate, create a more interesting story than what I'm doing. In the next couple of weeks, we're going to make it look better with CSS, and then we're also going to add media with images. So we'll add a lot more to this to make it look interesting, but we're just learning the basics. All right, I'll see you guys in the next video where we will publish this beautiful website on GitHub.